Welcome to Clienting, the place to get information about legal marketing and client development in the digital age. Here are your hosts, Guy Sakalakis and Kelly Street.
How you doing today, Guy?
Hey, Kelly.
Hey.
I'm great. I'm good.
What is exciting in your life right now?
Well, as many of my friends and other people who know me know, it is football season, and I am very excited about football, particularly college football, which starts this weekend.
Yes. Your life becomes something that I cannot possibly ever understand for the next 3 months. Yeah. I just continue to think like, oh, she is really a special person.
I'm brainwashed, and my wife, I've set a lot of excellent precedent since we've met. And so I shouldn't tell these secrets because otherwise she's going to listen. I don't think she listens, but my number of trips to Michigan dwindles every year. Although I think I'm doing 3 or 4 games this year. So
that is pretty good. Okay, so on today's episode, we are talking with Janine Sickmeyer all about social media and using social media to build your brand and be really transparent.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think is particularly great about Janine in this episode is listeners are going to get a chance to hear from someone who has both worked at a law firm and has seen client development at the firm, as well as marketing her own product, which, while product marketing is obviously different than professional service marketing, their approach and some of the things they do to give peeks behind the scenes and share what's going on at their business, I think has some application for law firms. And so we are very honored to have Janine joining us today.
Here is the episode.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me. I'm Janine Sickmeyer. I'm CEO and founder of NextChapter. NextChapter is a web application for attorneys to prepare and manage their bankruptcy cases online. So prior to this, I was a paralegal in the bankruptcy field for several years, and I've just always been particularly fascinated in kind of that intersection between law and technology. And I started working on NextChapter about 5 years ago, just as a way to fill a need in the market. So kind of just like a brief background on me, I was a paralegal. I learned how to code, and I built a team of skill developers. We worked together on NextChapter for about 2.5 years and launched it in 2016. So since then, we've just been, building features and talking to attorneys about what they want to see and trying to grow. And we've actually grown substantially, 16% month over month since we founded.
That is awesome. Before we get into our topic of the day, which is social media and transparency, I actually just want to ask you, as a former paralegal, how excited are you about the changes that some states are making to let paralegals help lawyers do more?
Yeah, I think that's great. I remember it was a challenging time when I was a paralegal because, people didn't really work with virtual paralegals yet. And I was in an in-house paralegal, and I went out on my own to start a virtual paralegal business. And I was preparing those documents for attorneys and talking with the debtors to collect the information to prepare the bankruptcies. And there was always this, unknown that attorneys didn't really want to work with someone out of their office. The thought of hiring a virtual paralegal was just, this is 10 years ago too. So they weren't really comfortable with that. And now allowing paralegals to do more for attorneys and, people just working online remotely. It's great. We're actually creating the service part of NextChapter, which is the virtual paralegal segment here. And that's actually going to be launching in the fall. And we've talked about it for a long time, but just didn't know how to kind of include it into NextChapter. But we got our first customer today, actually. And we were like, oh, we need to start this part of the business now. So it's kind of fun. The rest of my team is in the other room, like trying to figure out, the process for this new service part, which is actually my old business. So it's kind of cool.
You've got a lot of experience both working with lawyers at a law firm as a paralegal. You have now probably have met tons of lawyers through them being your customers at NextChapter, and you also have to market NextChapter. So there's these 3 different kind of client development audiences that I think you can provide a lot of helpful insight on, pulling back from 10 years ago, the evolution from, hey, I worked with these lawyers. This is the stuff that they were doing. Some of them were reluctant to get on board. We tried lead generation. some of it worked, some of it didn't work. And then, telling that story from, what you were doing back then, what was working back then, what's working more now, like what are the stories that you hear from your customers at NextChapter even that say, this is the stuff that we're focused on. And then the third piece being, what does NextChapter do that NextChapter's had success to actually attract the lawyer audience? Because I think there are a lot of lawyers too with quote unquote side hustles or trying to build technology products. I think that this would be a valuable conversation to have even about that. So those are kind of the themes that I was just curious to get your thoughts on. And, I don't want to put you on the spot. It's more of just, hey, what do you remember working back then? How'd that evolve? And what are you seeing working now?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. So back then, I think, it was just attorneys just were very reluctant to being online and just didn't really want to put themselves out there on Twitter or didn't find the value of, talking to and finding clients through social media. And I was following people like, Gary Vaynerchuk back then, who, is always saying, you need to be online, you need to be right now, he may be still talking about Snapchat and different things that, he says you should just be all over the internet and where people are. Because really everyone has a cell phone. Everyone, that's where people are more than ever. So I think even back then I was like, we've got to get on, how can we as a law firm find where people are talking, about needing help or looking for not just in, bankruptcy or debt resolution, but there was, it was a general practice firm where I was working in back then. And so people were also, we were trying to find, criminal clients and people who just speeding tickets, so it was interesting because everybody at the firm was very reluctant to kind of reaching out to anybody who was talking about, oh man, I just got a ticket. And, and I was like, well, isn't there a way to do that without, approaching them? And I don't, we never really ended up going that route, but I think just like building an audience back then, just by creating a blog and pushing, your content and talking about the things that we were doing inside the law firm. And at the time, I remember the partners climbed Mount Kilimanjaro and I was like, we've got to get this, talked about. I thought it was really interesting and fun and something different. And so we used a little, PR locally to talk about how the law firm, partners did that and how they used, some of that when they came back just to better their business because they had a chance to, go and get away together for a couple of weeks. And they continue to do fun things like that. And I thought that was, a really cool thing to talk about online and make them more personal and authentic. And that was something that, back then they were like, nobody wants to hear about this. And I'm like, yeah, they do. I think this is a great way for clients to see that you guys are real people too.
Yeah, people absolutely want to hear about that. I love that kind of thing. I love seeing that lawyers are real people. There's someone I follow on Instagram who she almost never posts about her law firm. She's an entertainment lawyer, but she posts about her, I think they're pet iguanas, her lizards, and she posts about all this other interesting stuff in her life. And she's really quirky and kind of strange, but I bet that works with her clients.
Oh, yeah. And Instagram is something that's really fun right now because I think that people are starting to realize, you don't have to be so businessy there. You can go on there as a lawyer and be yourself and people will find that entertaining. Like, remember you when they need help or, when they're looking for something, when they need to talk about their business documents or, their parent that is, going through a hard time or whatever. Those are the people that I remember too. And with NextChapter, that's something that's really fun. We're working on a lot of different kinds of avenues to talk to lawyers. And NextChapter, we've been posting these customer stories, which is really fun because we're personalizing these attorneys. We're asking questions, what do you like to do for fun? And we have them submit their pictures of their, them with their kids or their vacations and different things that show that they're just, having fun and regular people. And then we highlight those on our Instagram account. And just the other day, we had one of our customers say, hey, sent me a direct message through Instagram. And she was like, hey, how can I get featured? I left our, old software for you guys. And I'd love to be, I've been a loyal customer. I'd love to be featured like this other attorney was. And I was like, hey, so that was pretty exciting because I was like, oh, we'll see if anybody really wants to look at this kind of stuff on Instagram from a software company, and they do. And that was really cool. I was like, yes, we got another customer story through, something I love playing with, Instagram. So
And I think that's such a good point too, because one of the things, and this is why, again, I think your experience translates so well, is we hear a lot of, well, people hire lawyers, they don't hire law firms. How do you create a law firm brand? And, you've had to do that with, NextChapter software. So like you said, it's like, this is boring software. How do we actually put stuff online that people are going to want to engage with as a boring software company? And guess what? It's not about the boring software company. It's about the people, the customer stories, that kind of stuff, which I think that's an important takeaway for lawyers, is that, you can market your practice online in a way that's not just talking about your boring legal stuff that no one cares about, but whether it's being quirky or sharing, client stories are a little bit unique for law firms because there's a bunch of ethics rules you have to make sure that you're paying attention to, but the concept's still there, right? So it's still the telling the stories, giving a peek behind the scenes, showing what's going on at the firm. That's kind of stuff can work for whether it's a boring software company or a boring law firm.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We use Instagram and Facebook in that way, where we are developing our brand. That it's more of a fun, like peek behind the scenes type of avenue that we're doing. So we're sharing in-office pictures, talking about our team lunches. We sit around while we're, coding and working on the application, and we're talking about like true crime podcasts, so we talk about things like that on our Instagram, just, silly things in the office. And we do a lot of volunteer events. Sometimes we'll just like go to the park to work, and I'm like, hey, why not just capture all this and share it? Because it may seem like a very boring kind of thing, bankruptcy software, but we try to find a way to make it fun, and I think even when recruiting people, it's a really great way for them to see too. This isn't, it's not just like sitting behind a desk and coding for hours. You're with real people, and that behind the scenes kind of stuff on your social media accounts can really help with recruiting the right, kind of people for your culture.
And speaking of people and culture, one of my favorite things that you guys do at NextChapter that I think is absolutely something that I am going to be learning from, aka stealing in the next year, and that law firms can do, is the Meet the Team posts and putting information out there about who it is that you could be working with as, clients of NextChapter, who it is as a lawyer that you could be working with. And Palace Law, who we've clearly had on the podcast, two of the people, they do a really good job at that too. So can you talk about how people can do that well, or how you think that law firms can do the Meet the Team stuff better than just like, I have 45 years of experience?
Oh, yeah, of course. So it's funny. The reason we started that was because we started these customer stories, and everybody loves seeing the customers that are using NextChapter. It's not just a testimonial, but it's also giving them a highlighted page and, showing who they really are. And so we were like, well, if we're doing this for our customers, we should do it internally. But we had to start with Katie because she's the manager of customer success, and talking to everybody on our app behind the scenes. She's, the one who does the in-app chat. And so we were like, sometimes, attorneys are asking questions and they're just, chatting with her. And we're like, do they know that she's a real person? Because, they're just like, hello, anybody there? And like all these question marks. And we're like, Katie's really like, she has a lot to her. So we should do a Meet the Team post and kind of introduce her, talk about, the things she likes and what she does for fun. And also throw in a couple fun things about NextChapter, like what's your favorite feature that we developed. And it actually ended up getting a lot of views, and a lot of our customers were like, oh, Katie's just been great. She's, the best, awesome at customer success. So it's cool. We end up, what we do is we send her internally, we'll send her a questionnaire, and, we use Typeform to just have her fill it all out, add her pictures, and send that back to Jamie, who then reviews and posts. And then we throw it in our company newsletter. We send out a monthly newsletter to all of our users, and it's not really about like NextChapter's features or highlighting any. It's not like salesy in any way. We're just saying, hey, here's some fun things in legal tech. We will highlight some new up and coming startups that we think would be a good option for attorneys to check out, because that's kind of my fun time. I get to look up some new legal tech companies and And if I'm like, hey, that would be great for a bankruptcy attorney, we'll just like throw them in our newsletter. And we highlight some other things, tell them about some webinars upcoming. And then we put things like, here's a team member that you guys may not know about. I think, even with attorneys, like law firms can do this by, highlighting your paralegals, your, receptionists, people that the clients talk to all the time, because they're seeing their about page, the attorney's about page, and they know their history, and all of that. But I think that highlighting the other people that the clients talk to all the time would make it really personable.
Yes, I love that. And the newsletter too, even though it's not a clear sales tool, it's great that you're building trust in all these other areas. And I think that's another thing that law firms can really learn from is building trust and being a resource for information. And then after that, being the company that they want to use or the law firm that they want to use.
Oh, yeah. I've found that with the newsletter, we do end up getting a lot of people signing up for the webinars through that, which is great because it's hard we're like, when do we tell people that we have, upcoming features that have these other opportunities for them to learn? And we don't want to just send that out on its own. So it's nice to throw in a whole bunch of things in that, the monthly newsletter, just making it more friendly and fun. I even put like a beach vibes playlist on the last one because I was getting ready to, go on my trip. And I'm like, hey, it's July. Let's just, I'm going to make this fun for me too. So we put together like a old Beach Boys, different fun songs that I thought and had some people click on that too. So I'm like, hey, that's fun. Maybe they listen to it on their Friday before 4th of July or whatever.
I don't know about our listeners, but I am writing furious tips down as you're going through these things myself. So you guys do Instagram really well, but are there other social media platforms that you're seeing any traction on and have any tips for any of the other ones?
Yeah, sure. So I love Twitter for business. I mean, I've been using Twitter since I started back in 2013. I didn't even have a product or a team yet, but I wanted to make sure that, I could build an audience and start talking to people. So I remember back then, I was using Twitter as a way to just find my niche and start talking to other legal tech founders, people in the legal space. I mean, I wasn't talking to attorneys as much, it was mainly just other people that I was finding inspiration from. And it was a great time because I think it's kind of changed a little bit since then. But using Twitter as the first place to kind of talk about my nerdy discoveries with like SaaS products and bankruptcy case updates and things like that, and then start forming my network. It wasn't very personal. You're talking more about like, here's what's going on in legal tech and what we're trying to do. But again, like, I think NextChapter was just an idea when I started talking so much on Twitter about it. And then I was able to take that network offline. And that was when things like really changed, and going to those conferences and meeting people that I had been talking to on Twitter for so many years was, it was great because I was like, oh, and everybody was like, wow, you're so energetic and you're just different than you are on Twitter. I'm like, well, I mean, I only had 140 characters. I don't know. I try. And so I was like, maybe I am a little bit too, businessy here, because once I started meeting people at like CleoCon and Avia Tech Show, and I started finding that, my energy, I guess, was not really reflective in Twitter so much. So that was fun though, to be able to see everybody in real life. You're like, wow, you're so tall. I thought you were just, this little picture. And that was kind of cool. I remember going to the very first Clio conference, and there were only like 200 people there, and it was just super intimate. And so, things like that were great because we had those personal connections. We were able to just all meet together offline. And although Twitter was such a great thing at the time, I think that, bringing that offline was really good too. And with NextChapter, some of the other things, we've been working very heavily in Facebook ads. It's been great. And it's something that you can do like, for $10 a day. You can set your daily limit if you want. You can set it lower. You have the opportunity to make your budget whatever it is that you want. And it's been great that we've been getting maybe 30, 40 signups a month. We're targeting paralegals, assistants, support staff. It's not always just attorneys, which is really cool. And I mean, law firms can use Facebook ads So easily. It blows my mind. It takes a little bit of time to figure it out, but once you kind of zone in and just go through it like, page by page and learn how to do it, then it can really pay off.
How are you doing the targeting? Because I know this is something that I think there's still some room for improvement there, at least on the B2B targeting for Facebook ads. So do you have any kind of secrets to share?
You can target by profession, which has been helpful in the past. Also by interests, so there could be like lawyers who are interested in the American Bankruptcy Institute or ABA. So I think being able to kind of look through all of the options that they have and not just like, okay, I want, women under this age and this location, but you can go a step further and see what other kind of topics or keywords, would help you. For us, you can also import your leads and talk to people who have been already interested. So that's something that's great for us because we have so many people who sign up for NextChapter, and maybe they just don't come back in the system. I mean, I do that when I sign up for services, and then if they're free and then I want to check it out and then forget, and then I get an ad like a week later and I'm like, oh, I forgot about that. I want to check that tool out again, so I might just go back to it because it kind of popped up in my mind. And when I saw that, so you can, by importing the leads and then also you can add a pixel to your site, and anyone that's visiting your site, just like remarketing, you can target them as well if they've already come to your site and want to check it out. So we do a lot of that with NextChapter.
That's awesome. I want to go back. I just thought of a question on Twitter, and I have as our kind of last wrap up question for both you and Guy. As people have been in the legal and legal tech space way longer than I have, do you think Twitter is still good for more than just lawyer to lawyer referrals? Like, are there clients who are engaging with lawyers or potential clients or people who just have law firm questions who are engaging with lawyers on Twitter?
I don't know, because I feel like Twitter is interesting. My nieces are using Twitter and they're like 18 and they're using it way more than like Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat. And so I'm like, what are they doing on Twitter? Like they're talking to their friends like crazy and sharing weird things. And so it's really interesting. I think, the different age groups are using it in different ways. And so for me, I'm not going to hop on Twitter if I'm looking for business, like if I'm looking for a service, a photographer or a lawyer or something like that. I'm probably going to Instagram, like, hey, #newborn photography and looking in Columbus, something like that. I don't know that clients are going to be using that in the same way, but being the market, still being a market leader, getting credibility by showing that your office is putting out content, sharing other things, communicating with other people in the space. I think all that's very important.
Yeah. Guy, what do you think in your experience about that?
Yeah, my thing is that you can't make a blanket generalization like, does Twitter work, right? Because it's how you're using it, who your audience is, and all that kind of stuff. So like direct response, like if you're posting like free consultation, I think you're more likely to get unfollowed and blocked. But if you're nurturing relationships, building connections, having conversations, staying top of mind, if your clients tend to, say you are... Take an example of you represent shareholders in shareholder litigation disputes. I think, there's a lot of talk, like financial conversations, that community is online a lot. If you work in blockchain, right? There's blockchains all over Twitter. If you work in representing journalists, the journalists are on Twitter. So if you're like trying to do traditional direct response advertising in a B2C context, I think Twitter's not going to be the most efficient way to spend your money and time. But, unfortunately, there's not a magic bullet, whether it's a platform or a technique. The devil's in the details and how you're executing your campaigns and identifying your audience. And I think the other thing, too, is just as a general, and Janine mentioned this earlier, too, when she was talking about NextChapter, but, we tend to paint ourselves in these boxes of audience where it's like, well, I'm only want to advertise to this specific person. But one of the real powers of the internet, social networking media in general, is this network effect, right? So just because you might advertise or communicate or message to somebody in a way that resonates with them, when they're top of mind, when you become top of mind for them, you're more likely to get the referral, right? So instead of just focus, I mean, direct response has its place. There's no question about it. It's extremely efficient. People that are looking for you, and that's why search is so good. But I think that we've also lost some of the more traditional concepts of staying top of mind with a select audience that social media is really good at. And so from that perspective, I think Twitter can be useful, but I haven't seen a ton of great advertising campaigns on Twitter that are direct response for targeting, whether it's bankruptcy, legal services consumers, or criminal defense or whatever. But I just did a search too. I just did a search on Twitter for lawyer and recommendations, and there are people that are out there asking for recommendations for lawyers. So they're out there. But again, if you're talking about in the context of direct response advertising, I think it's probably not the most efficient way to spend cash.
I like it. Thank you. And Janine, thank you so much. I hope that everyone found this as helpful as I did. I know I took a ton of notes and will be making some interesting changes and additions to the things that we're doing at Attorney Sync. So thank you so much, Janine, for joining us. I had a great time talking to you.
Great. Thanks so much, guys, for having me.